our founder is John Stein. Brad Leimer is a longtime analyst in the fintech space. He's currently managing director and head of fintech strategy at Explorer Advisory and Capital. And John Stein is the founder and CEO of Betterment, which was founded in 2008, about 6 years before the robo-advisory craze and explosion in the US. So with that, I'll turn things over to Brad and get things going.
So welcome everybody. It's a pleasure, John, to have you here again. We were talking beforehand, and the last time that both of us were on stage, we were winning Best of Show awards. So last spring, I took a startup that I advised, Alpha Rank, and we won. Surprisingly, that was pretty exciting to be on that side of it. Now John was last year probably in a room about this size. And in 2010, in September in New York, he pitched at Finovate, and then a year later pitched again, winning Best of Show. But that wasn't the first time that the product was released. It's always fun to get first dibs here. Let's go back to that. So in May of 2010, May 25th, you launched a TechCrunch Disrupt. Now what was interesting about that is that people had never seen anything like what John had built with his team. The judges' feedback that day was really interesting, I thought, given where the market has gone. VC Chris Sacca, who's had his own shares of misjudgment of late, said, "I worry that it's too simple. People don't trust it if it's too simple. People expect a little bewilderment. It's almost like a toy." So he was questioning the credibility of something that's made investments seem so simple. An angel investor, Yasi, already said, I hope ironically, that people like to invest in institutions that they trust. And the examples that he gave were Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. So let's go back to that. Let's talk about the idea behind Betterment, and let's talk about just where you were in 2010.
It's great. So thank you for that. Good to be back on stage with you, and good to be here. Just for my context, how many people in the audience today have heard of Betterment? You must keep your hand up if you're a customer. A few. Well, thank you all for being customers. I hope you're satisfied. If not, please come talk to me after. I'd love to know how we can serve you better. When we launched on stage at TechCrunch in 2010, I think we were probably the only startup there out of 50 that actually launched on that day. It was a requirement of the conference that you actually launch your product. And we had been up for every night for the entire week before coding and getting everything ready for the launch. I've never been so stressed or excited as I was on that day. I'd practiced my entire speech down to the word. I would never do it again this way, but I actually had everything memorized and delivered it. And we were just so happy. It was like that moment when, I don't know, like when you get into college, right? When you have this feeling of like, now we're done, and the rest is just gravy, and it's going to be easy from here on out, right? So it was just the very beginning, of course. And to hear that feedback from Chris and others, at the time, it was a little bit disheartening, to hear people not get it.
Well, they're talking about your baby, right?
Yeah, right. But it's also not that surprising. I think from day one, and when I first had this idea, and going way back, I mean, I'd been working in financial services for a few years. I'd studied economics as an undergrad and a little bit of behavior and psychology.
But you were pre-med.
Well, I did a post-bac pre-med. Before that, I was an economics major. So I graduated with an economics concentration, and I got my CFA along the way. For a while, I thought maybe I'll be a doctor. I thought that would be like a good way to serve people. But I was volunteering in the hospital, and I was working in the biolabs, and I didn't like blood. And there's this part of me that really wanted to help people, but to do it in a scalable way. Like when I was at the hospital, I looked around and I thought, this place is a disaster. I wanted to fix the hospital. Right? I wanted to fix the system. And I realized through a series of experiences that I was probably better suited in business. And I didn't really know what that meant, but I got my start consulting to banks. And through working with the country's largest banks and brokers, learned enough about the space that we're all in to be able to find and think about ways to make it better and to improve it. And before I even knew what Betterment would be, whether we would be a broker or a bank or a payments company, I had a lot of ideas around how to improve things and how to make money better. I had the name. I knew it was going to be about making something better in financial services, and so we had this name, Betterment. We're just going to make it better. We're going to start with the customer and what customers want, not the way banks traditionally think about things, which is selling products, not the way mutual funds think about things, which is selling their products. What does a customer want? What are their needs? What are their goals? How do they think about life? How do we make their life better by making them better at money? Those kinds of things, thinking about it differently. And of course, even in the industry, I would talk to clients and they'd say, I had one client who said, John, there are some industries that are about customers, and there are some industries that are about money. And financial services is about money. So you're doing it wrong. This is the way a lot of the industry thinks still to this day. It's about what products do we have and how do we distribute them. To me, that's not a great experience for anybody. You have to start with the customer and what the customers want. I'm talking a lot. I'm going to let you ask.
No. When I think about this space, and you think about sort of the earlier pioneers with direct trading or investments, you think of the Charles Schwabs and the E-Trades and others of the world. But what really still was not there was simple onboarding, a simple way to add funds, a simple way to do this via mobile, and those are things that really came quickly. Now, kind of talking about your early success in investing or getting investments. Now you guys are valued at about $800 million. You just finished this year 2 stages of an E round. Total investment now about $275 million. You've got Anthemis, Bessemer, Menlo Ventures, City Ventures, and many others. And the big one from Finovate in their follow-up. When's the IPO?
When we launched, again, going back to 2010, I said a couple things. I said, one, if we're successful, we're going to have lots of competition. Everyone is going to be in this space. Everyone's going to have to come after us. Two, someday we want to be a public company. We think that the way to build this is to be independent, to be the first mass market advisor that delivers advice to everyone, and that's never been done before. Right? There's financial advisors, but they only serve a few people. It's kind of a mom and pop business. We wanted to bring advice to everybody because we believe that's the future of financial services. If you want to bring advice, you can't do that as part of a bank because a bank has products it wants to sell. You can't do that as part of a mutual fund company because they just want to sell their stuff. So we had to be independent of everybody else, and that's been part of our vision from day one.
So let's talk about some traction then. So about 280,000 customers, give or take. You want to make any news? You hit 300 yet? 10 billion in assets, so the largest independent robo-advisor. I think we're ready to kill that term because you've now added people back into the mix, but they were probably always there. So maybe talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we've grown so quickly. We just celebrated our 10 billion milestone, which is a big one. And I like to tell the story that it took us 2.5 years to get to $50 million under management. That was our first celebration. We actually went to Balthazar downtown and had a seafood tower. That was the way that I was like, we're going big, team. Like, this is it. Here we go. $50 for the seafood tower. It was 2.5 years, and I couldn't believe those people who trusted us with that first $50 million. Like the trust that you have to go to some unknown. To really, there was something right in what they said on the panel at TechCrunch. And then it took us another 2.5 years to get to $1 billion. So we grew 20x in the next 2.5 years, and then it took us 2.5 years to get to 10 billion. So 10x in that time. We've continued to accelerate our growth and are growing this year faster than ever. This month has been incredible. I think when we look at why that is, and you mentioned a few things. There's ease of sign up. There's having a mobile experience and driving things that way, and why the industry gets the appeal that it does. clearly, we're not done. Clearly, it's still early days for this vision. And we know that people want much more from us. We look at our customer feedback every day, and people love the product, but we want to continue down these lanes of how do we further personalize? Because I think we can go in ways that the traditional brokers and mutual fund firms can't by further personalizing to deliver real individual indexes for each person. I think we can go down the lane of guidance, and you saw us, and coming back to your question, you saw us launch earlier this year human advice as its own product, and we recently launched messaging-driven advice as its own product. This is an incredibly exciting thing for us, this messaging, because today it's staffed with CFPs, but we're building, and we've launched in hackathons and so on, bots that can really do a great job of answering the most common questions. The top 5 questions that we get from people when they message one of our advisors. And by the way, this is accessible. This is advice from a CFP that's available to almost 300,000 of our customers.
24/7?
No additional fee.
Like what's?
24/7, message anytime. The average response time to your question is under 3 minutes. People ask things like, should I buy or should I rent? Which IRA should I open? How much should I be contributing to retirement? And the top 5 or 10 questions, we have content against all of those things, or we have calculators that help you answer these questions. It's just, people are lazy and they'd rather ask somebody. And so as we think about how to automate that, we've already got a lot of the content and calculators to build into that channel. And so it's very exciting to see how people are engaging with that advice and what we can do with more AI as we go forward.
I think one of the things that banks or traditional financial service companies in the investment space sort of forget is the value of communicating with your client. It's not just the ability to, in 3 minutes, get a response. That's certainly critical. But the amount of services like yours that I've signed up for and get constant communication about where my portfolio stands, what's happening in the market, what my personal interest is so much better at companies that are smaller. And I think that's one of the critical things that, the larger the institution, the further away they are from what earlier someone had talked about, sort of empathizing with the needs of the customer. You talked about product a little bit. Let's kind of dive into that, because there have been some things that you guys have announced just this morning, but let's first paint the picture. When you first launched, it was a 90 basis point product. Now you've come down, you've got 2 portfolios initially, 2 different tiers, if you will. One that is digital tier with $0 minimum to start, 40 basis points. Okay?
No, that's 25.
25, sorry.
Yeah.
And then you've got a 40 basis point fee-based premium with 100,000 to start. So you've got 2 ways to kind of come into Betterment. You have 3 primary lines of business. You've got the B2C, which is what most people with the robo think of. You've got the RIA platform, which 100 partners or so are with. What's that?
Oh, we have over 1,000 advisors
that's great.
on the platform. Yeah.
And then the sort of 401k management, the B2B2C, and that's the one that has about 100 or so growing. Talk about that.
Over 400 companies,
Crazy.
401k.
So with this company and companies in this space, you see an article from 3 months ago, and those numbers are done. So they're gaining, what, a billion, a billion in assets about every 40 to 50 days?
Yeah.
And so think about that growth. So getting into what you announced this morning, you have a normal portfolio, a social investment portfolio, which I want to ask about, and then you got a couple new things. Let's go into what you could do.
Yeah, we've seen. I talked about our growth in one form, just in terms of how we remembered it, but another way to think about it is comparing it to other things. I mean, I think if we look at the introduction of ETFs plus 7 years, we've grown faster than ETFs did in the first 7 years. If you look at BlackRock in the first 7 years, we've grown faster than BlackRock did in the first 7 years. So that curve, I think, is exciting for us. We've launched today more ways to personalize your portfolio. We've been hearing this from customers that gosh, I love what you do at Betterment, but I'd really like a way to manage income and retirement. And so we did all of our research, and we looked at how we might construct a portfolio internally with the existing ETFs that are out there and non-ETF assets and so on. And we ended up partnering with BlackRock to provide multiple income portfolios for different situations. And so now we have that retirement income product. We heard from customers that they wanted something that had more factor weightings and was more of a smart beta approach. And again, we looked internally at how we might provide that. And ultimately, we've been working with the folks at GSAM, at Goldman Sachs Asset Management, on some portfolios for our advisors. And we ended up partnering with them on the retail side as well, because we had really good adoption and interest in those portfolios. All of these are ETF portfolios. We receive no compensation for them. We have no incentive to recommend them, nor do we pay anything beyond sort of the same ETF fees that customers pay for these products anywhere in the market. And so we retain our independence as an advisor, which is most critical to our business. But we offer more options to allow people to personalize for their goals, their values, their views. Just a couple weeks ago, we launched the first global socially responsible portfolio. And it's, in my view, the best way you can diversify globally and still have a socially responsible portfolio. So we continue to help people personalize for their values and views, and that's an important part of our strategy going forward.
So let's go back to the competition a little bit. When you think about 7 years ago, and you think about how much was written about, the automation being added to investment, a lot of people dismiss this. So you've got $20 trillion that are mutual funds and ETFs, and just the amount of shift in the market to what is ETF investments for long term has been phenomenal, right? Mm-hmm. You've got fewer and fewer direct companies to invest in, about half as much as you did a decade ago. Mm-hmm. And this wave of people putting money into ETFs and building applications, and we're talking banks are building robos, right? My last bank, something there invested in Sigfig, and they were partnering with Wells and Citizens and others. Obviously, Wealthfront is doing well. They're closing in on 7-8 billion. Future Advisor, which sold out to BlackRock. And you look at these hybrid solutions that have been here for quite some time now, like personal capital and everything else. You have a lot of competition, but everybody seems to be doing well. So where do you see all that kind of coming in?
Wow,
more consolidation.
Sounds just like the words that we used for our recent management offsite, where I think the frame is we have this amazing tailwind due to growth of the space overall, and clearly being the leader in the category helps. But we have this headwind of increasing competition, and how do we think about that, and how do we continue to differentiate? Our belief is that it's all about investing in what customers want and thinking about listening to them, researching as much as we can, understanding our customers as best we can, and then delivering the values that they care about most, the things that delight them, the things that reduce their pain. Bezos has, one of these many great quotes that he has about, there's some people who try to predict the future, and we find that to be very hard. And there are other people who just look at the present. And there's some things that we know aren't going to change about our customers. And when we think about that, we think about the things that our customers come to us for that we have to continually deliver. We think about performance. The reason you hire us is because we're going to perform better than other options that you have with your money. Convenience, it's got to be easy. The future of money is more convenient than the past. That's just obvious. And peace of mind. You have to have confidence that we're on your side, that we're doing the right thing for you. And as long as we keep investing in those lanes that our customers care about most, I think we're going to continue to grow and to gain share in this, what should be, in my view, a competitive market. Ultimately, everyone should be providing advice. That's what financial services should be about. It should be about serving you, not selling you product. And I believe that we'll be the best because we started with customer view, we're leading the space, we listen to our customers. You mentioned empathy, that people talked about that on a prior panel. Morgan Housel, who many of you know, had a blog post recently, I thought it was just great. He said, there's 5 sources of customer edge, and I reduced it down for myself to 3 that I think are most valuable. 1 is, if you're a startup, you can win because you empathize better with your customers. 2, because you learn and you iterate faster. And 3, because you hire better people. And so we continue to focus on that internally as we seek to extend our competitive advantages.
So that doesn't mean that there's not going to continue to be competition and more changes to this space. I mean, are you concerned that when you talk to the more established investment companies like a Schwab, where a couple years ago they launched their equivalent of a lower cost robo, and they're at $22 billion, and Vanguard launched and they're at $83 billion. I mean, that's throwing gas onto the fire in terms of growth. Does that concern you at all, or are you like looking at the customers that are coming in that still want something different?
I think these are great companies, right? I think, and they do a lot of things well. I think if you really take a look, though, at the services that they're offering, they're nothing like what we do for our customers. Right? And so they're successfully transitioning some people who had one account with them and are too lazy to open up an account with somebody else to a new offering that's marginally different or better than whatever they had before. But they're not continuing to invest, in my view, in doing what's best for the customer. They're not continuing to invest in driving the most value to their customers. We're doing that every day, and we have this singular focus. And I asked the question of my management team the other day at a meeting, if you're at one of these competitors and you're thinking about us, if you're in their room right now and talking about Betterment, what are you most afraid of? What are you thinking about? And there were a lot of answers. Everyone had different answers around the room, but there were a few themes. And one of the major themes was this relentless focus on the customer, that we're just constantly going at it. And yeah, they have tons of assets. I mean, these are trillion-dollar money managers. Can they get $80, $100 billion into a new product? Of course. They have this existing installed base. But we're like, somebody on my team described it as we're that dog that's gnawing at their ankle, right? Like continuing to make progress.
I think banks look at it as, there are barbarians at the gate still. But I think the big lesson, I think, from the last decade of fintech has been that the conversation has changed and shifted from one not just about profits and traditional banking, but one of the customer being first, and the iteration is around the customer needs. You talk about doing what's right for the customer, and you were a big proponent of the existing fiduciary rule being passed. You put out full-page ads encouraging the incoming administration to let the Department of Labor put it in as is. When that didn't happen, you had a sort of mock funeral, or maybe a real funeral in April. Talk about what that rule means, and how do you see it actually being enacted?
We had it was 401k day. I know you all know this, that it was 401k day last week. It's circled in red on your calendars, right? Last week we had our whole Betterment for Business advisory board into the office for a press event and on 401k day. And we talked about the history of the 401k. And Judy Morris, who's on our advisory board, was in the DOL working on this rule for 3.5 years and is so passionate about it. And she's an amazing speaker on it and the good that it will do for consumers. And we got the question there, what now? It seems like things have been rolled back. It seems that maybe it won't. Maybe the best interest contract exemption won't go into effect. They're really trying to kill that. And I thought Judy's answer was excellent. She said, the brilliance, and she wasn't taking personal credit for it, but the brilliance of this rule is that by just enacting the fiduciary standard, which has already happened, is already in effect, everyone is taking a closer look at their business practices and changing them already. Most of the impact is already happening. The whole business providing retirement advice has fundamentally changed. No one wants to work with the worst players. People are re-looking at fee agreements. Maybe they don't feel like they have to do all the compliance with this new best interest contract exemption, but she said that wasn't even the heart of it, right? The heart of it is already out there, that you are now a fiduciary. And there are ways to think about class action suits and the kinds of things that the contract exemption clearly allowed for, even without that. And her feeling, and I was just, my heart was warmed by this, is that much of the good of this rule is already in place. And look, our feeling is we're on the right side of this already, and I think other firms are coming to that right side of it, of being aligned with the customer's best interest, of not receiving conflicted payments, and I think that's required, really, for us to build the future of retirement. We talk at times, and we talked on this panel, about how we've gone from a society where we all had pensions, and the 401k was introduced in the 70s, as you all know. Judy opened up a paper that she had from the Carter administration that talked about what they knew about the 401k when they launched it. And they said, what we know is some of the industries that are more likely to adopt 401k plans are in decline. And the industries where people are less likely to be covered, services, tourism, hospitality, things like this, are ascendant. And so we will have to make changes to this policy over time in order to cover all Americans. Of course, they knew then what the problems would be, 40 years later, that there would be this retirement crisis where most of us don't save enough. The vast majority of Americans have insufficient retirement savings. And the government has not done, let's say, enough, if anything, about it. We think we can't wait for the government to come out with the next plan. We took it upon ourselves to build a plan that would default people to the right kinds of behavior, of higher contribution rates. 3% isn't enough, right? You need at least 6% to start. You need auto increases thereafter. It should be default opt-out. We get something like 90%, 90+% compliance when we have people opt in and they have to opt out of the plan. So all of these kinds of right decisions about how to design a plan, we know how to do it. There's been behavioral research and economic research about how to build an optimal savings plan for years. It's been out there for 20 years. Just no one has done it until today. And so Betterment for Business does this today. And I'm optimistic that whether or not the DOL rule is formally passed, more and more retirement plans are going to be having to adopt this kind of advice, because now you have to be a fiduciary. You have to act in your client's best interest.
I mean, I think if anything, the entire industry, not just on the investment side, needs the equivalent of a fiduciary. If this business continues to do things like bring in $30 billion in overdraft fees, when simple changes to the way that they notify customers can undo a lot of that, it's the idea of do no harm, which is killing this industry. And other things like Equifax breaches and these type of things, I mean, it's not helping us.
We could not agree more on that. I love what you said there, which is that everything should be fiduciary in this industry. That's the core of our vision for Betterment, is that over time, advice impacts everything you do in financial services. You think about your self-managed wallet. We talk a lot about the parallels to a self-driving car. If you're going to have that managed intelligently for you, you have to really trust the algorithm or the people who are doing the management. They better put your best interest first.
So let's get into this last question. You've said that you want Betterment to be the Amazon of financial services. Earlier today, Ron Shevlin sort of poked a spear in the side of platformification and this idea that banks as platforms are going to sort of rule the roost. What is open platforms? What does this idea of an Amazon supermarket of bundling, unbundling? I mean, where is financial services heading, and what part do you want to play in?
The reason I say that about we want to be the Amazon of financial services, because I admire so much the way that Amazon constantly delivers customer value. They just keep driving price down. They keep investing in more that they can give you. for the same price and just driving constant innovation and value better than any firm out there today, in my view. I believe that's needed in financial services, and you can count on two hands the number of firms that have broken through to become major financial services brands in the last 20 years. There's just not many of them because of all the regulatory red tape, because of the burdens of security and trust and the difficulty of building a customer brand when there's so much inertia and misinformation out there. It's a hard industry to crack, but it needs to be changed. And I believe that by constantly investing in value, we'll get there. In terms of platforms, we work with a number of firms. We mentioned a couple earlier that we work with. We work with thousands of advisors to deliver advice to their clients and better serve them. We now work with hundreds of businesses, and we want to continue to partner with other like-minded innovators who value the same things we do. The parallel at Amazon is the marketplace, right? I think if we can power other people to deliver advice and compete with us in a sense for the customer, everyone's better off, right? We're able to serve more people with the things that we do best in terms of the technology and the management of your money and the personalization and the platform, and you get advice delivered the way that you want it, whether it's directly from us or through your existing advisor.
Well, I want to thank you for your time today. And on behalf of Finovate, the people that are working in these spaces, that are adding transparency to the industry, that are truly changing the nature of our relationship with our customers, you and Betterment are certainly part of that change. So thank you for your views.
Well, thank you.
Thank you, John and Brad. Brad, I must say your sock game is on point today, so good work.